Fitness isn't hard, it's just misunderstood. And I think one of the biggest reasons why people struggle to build muscle is because they think they need to do way more than they actually need to do. They think, oh, I need 5 exercises for chest, I need 5 exercises for back, and I need to do 6 sets per exercise. But what if I told you that you could build a very impressive physique without living in the gym? Because the truth is, you probably don't need nearly as much training as you think that you do. And I'm not saying this because I hate low volume. I'm saying this because when you dive deep into the research, it's a lot more nuanced than more sets equals more muscle. Let's start with something very important. Training volume matters. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that one set is all you need and all the other sets that you do are going to be completely useless. That is not what the research says. One of the most well-known meta-analyses on resistance training volume by Brad Schoenfield and colleagues looked at 15 studies and 34 treatment groups. They found that generally speaking, increasing weekly resistance training volume was associated with greater increases in muscle size. So yes, more productive volume can equal more growth. But here's where people screw up. They hear more volume equals more muscle. And then they interpret that as, oh, so therefore I should go into the gym and do as many sets as possible because the more sets that I do, that is exponentially increased muscle growth. But that is not what this study showed. The relationship between volume and growth is not just a straight line up. It looks more like this. And you get to a point in time where the more sets you're doing, they become less beneficial. The authors of this paper found a graded dose relationship, meaning more volume tended to produce greater hypertrophy, but that does not mean that you should endlessly add more and more and more sets. More recent dose response modeling continues to show that the relationship between resistance training dose and the adaptations is much more complex, rather than just simply more is always better. Think about it like this. If you basically go from no sets to a few sets, that's a huge improvement. Going from 2 sets to 5 sets could give you another boost or benefit. But going from 20 sets to 25 sets, that's a whole different conversation entirely. You are investing significantly more time for an additionally smaller and smaller and smaller benefit. And that's the important part that people forget. So here's where my philosophy comes in. For the average person who wants to build muscle, I think that starting around 1 to 2 hardworking sets per exercise and around 3 to 6 exercises per workout can be extremely effective. Notice that I said starting. I'm not saying everyone should be permanently doing exactly 2 sets of everything. I'm saying that you don't need to start with 20 sets per muscle group and then work backwards. You want to start with enough training to make progress, then if progress stalls and you've controlled the other variables, you can add more and more volume. Because here's the question I want you to start asking. How much training do I need to grow instead of how much training can I possibly recover from? In chest, for example, I might do 2 hard sets of an incline press. I might do 2 hard sets of a chest press, 2 hard sets of a fly. That's 6 working sets and I'm done. I'm not going to add another 4 exercises just because I'm afraid that I didn't do enough. I'm trying to make those 6 sets count. But I know some of you are saying, but Craig, you just showed us research that shows more volume equals more hypertrophy. Exactly, I'm not arguing that. This is where the nuance matters. The research supports a dose-response relationship. Remember that curve that I showed you. You might still be incrementally getting more and more muscle over time, but at some point, the significant amount of added time that you are adding to your gym sessions just doesn't equal the amount of return that you're getting from muscle growth. In fact, that is one of the biggest problems I see with a lot of people jumping into high volume training programs instead of starting lower, seeing if you see progress, and then slowly adding volume over time. Imagine Brad over here. Brad does 20 sets of chest every week. He's exhausted, his elbows hurt, his workouts take 2 hours, and he's barely progressing. So what's his answer? Well, his answer is to add 5 more sets. But maybe the answer is do less, recover better, and actually make the sets that he is doing more productive. Because the best program isn't the one with the most sets, it's the one that provides you with the best stimulus, allows you to recover, and progress over time. So this brings me to another misconception. Every set needs to be to failure. I actually think that this is one of the biggest reasons people burn themselves out training in the gym. Most people view it as, I have 2 sets, so I'm going to make these 2 sets absolute death. But again, the research doesn't really support that sentiment. 2022 systematic review and meta-analysis by Gergic and colleagues looked at 15 studies comparing resistance training performed to failure versus training that stopped short of failure. They found no significant difference between failure and non-failure training for hypertrophy programs. In other words, you don't have to take every set to absolute failure to build muscle. Now, that doesn't mean training hard doesn't matter. It most certainly does. For example, if you did a set and you had 15 reps in reserve, yeah, that's going to matter. But if you did a set and you had 3 reps in reserve, you're still going to build muscle. You can train close to failure, you can train with good technique, and you can control the movement. And you can accumulate productive training without completely annihilating your body. Now let's talk about frequency, because this is another thing people love to overcomplicate. Bro, you have to hit every muscle 3 times a week, or you have to train 6 times a week. But when research actually compared training frequencies while keeping weekly volume similar, the advantage of frequency becomes much less impressive. So in 2019, they did a systematic review and meta-analysis by Schoenfield and other colleagues looking at 25 studies. When training volume was equated, they found no significant difference in muscle hypertrophy between higher and lower training frequencies. That doesn't mean that frequency doesn't matter at all. Frequency does matter, but it's nuanced. Frequency can be a tool. If doing 6 sets of chest in one workout is just way too much, you should split it up into 2 or 3 sessions. The important question is, can you consistently perform high quality training sessions and recover from it? So if you came to me and you said, Craig, I want to build muscle, but I don't want fitness to consume my whole life. Well, I'd tell you to start simple. 1 to 2 hard sets per exercise, 3 to 6 exercises, training 3 to 4 times a week. The main thing is focusing on progression. If the week prior you were doing a weight and it felt really, really hard, but the next week you do that same weight and that last rep felt just a little bit better, that's progress. Because if you're doing 25 sets per workout and 6 months from now you haven't progressed in weight, you haven't progressed in reps, then what was the volume even doing in the first place? This is why I think fitness isn't hard. I think it's misunderstood. We've taken something that's actually pretty simple and overcomplicated the absolute hell out of it. We've turned it into a gigantic optimization problem. You don't need the perfect split. You don't need 15 exercises per muscle group. And you definitely don't need to train until you can't walk anymore. That's another topic because soreness does not equal muscle growth. You need a sufficient stimulus. You need to eat enough food and protein. You need to be able to recover from your training sessions, and you need to be progressing over time. That simple. And yes, more volume does support more muscle growth. The research does support that, but more isn't automatically worth it. Because at the end of the day, your goal should not be how much training can I survive from? If you don't want your life to be spent in the gym, the goal should be what is the minimum amount of training that I can do to produce a stimulus that I can recover from, that I can progress over time. And if you're currently doing way more than you need, maybe the answer isn't work harder, maybe it's work smarter. Because fitness isn't harder, we're just making it a lot harder than it needs to be. If you liked the video, hit subscribe. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next one.